A property law professor at West Virginia University, shown the documents in 2003, offered an assessment he did not put his name to formally. That the transactions were legally coherent, yes, but strange in their purpose. That they followed every rule of property law while appearing to serve some function other than the one those rules were built for. The 7 words are handwritten in the right margin of each deed, in a consistent script across all 17 documents, despite the fact that the deeds were drawn up over 7 decades, presumably by different hands, presumably at different times. The consistency of the script is not approximate, it is exact. The letter formations, the spacing, the particular way the third word begins with a capital that leans slightly left, these details do not vary. Document analysts who have examined 3 of the 17 deeds, the only 3 that have been made available for examination, have declined to offer a formal opinion on the authorship. One of them, a forensic document examiner with 30 years of experience, admitted, in an informal conversation, that the consistency across documents separated by decades sat outside any framework he had for evaluating such things. Asked whether that meant the words had been added later, all at once, by a single hand, he allowed that it was one possible explanation. It didn't account for the ink aging, though, which in each case matched the age of the surrounding text exactly. Beyond that, he preferred not to speculate. The 7 words have not been published in any account of the Gratchett family or Sorrow Fork. They are known to the Nicholas County Clerk's Office, which holds the deed records, and to a small number of researchers who have accessed the originals. Each person who has read the 7 words has been asked, at some point, to describe them. Each person has declined. The one thing they have agreed to say, without exception, is that the words are in English. Sorrow Fork is a tributary of the Gauley River, cutting back into the ridge country of Nicholas County in the part of West Virginia where the mountains are still learning what they are. The country there is dense and specific, the kind of terrain that resists generalization, where each hollow has its own microclimate, its own water chemistry, its own particular quality of silence in the late afternoon. The local name for Sorrow Fork predates the Gratchett family by at least 2 decades. It appears on a military survey from 1828, labeled without explanation, in a list of named waterways that includes descriptive names like Dry Fork and Sandy Lick, and one other name, just above Sorrow Fork on the list, that the surveyor appears to have begun writing, and then crossed out and replaced with a blank line. The Gratchett family came to Sorrow Fork in the autumn of 1848. The deed recorded by Aldous Gratchett on October 9th of that year transferred 280 acres from a man named Holt Sisler, who had held the land since 1831 and who, according to the deed, was selling for fair consideration and the purpose of removal. The phrase, "the purpose of removal," is unusual deed language. Holt Sisler did remove. He moved his family to Braxton County and does not appear in Nicholas County records again. His grandson, interviewed in 1938 as part of a New Deal oral history project, was asked about the family's time on the Gauley River and said only that his grandfather had spoken of it once, calling it a place they had been glad to leave. He said nothing more. The interviewer did not follow up. The transcript is held in the State Archives in Charleston. Aldous Gratchett arrived with 6 family members named in the deed as witnesses. They are listed by first name only: Mabel, Corin, Dred, Patience, Aldous the Younger, and one name that the county clerk's copying hand rendered ambiguously in the transcribed deed record as either Vest or Rest. The original deed uses the same ambiguous letter form. No subsequent document clarifies the name. The person to whom it belongs does not appear by any name in any record after 1848. The household at Sorrow Fork grew. By 1860, the census for Nicholas County lists 9 Gratchetts at the Sorrow Fork address. By 1870, 14. By 1880, the enumerator, a man named Grover Tully, who covered the upper Gauley drainage, recorded 22 members of the Gratchett household, ranging in age from less than 1 year to, in the case of one individual listed at the bottom of the household record, an age given as 97. The individual aged 97 is listed as Aldous Sr., which would make him the same Aldous who had signed the 1848 deed at age 41. 97 in 1880 would require a birth year of approximately 1783. It would also require that the man who signed the 1848 deed had been 65 at the time, not 41, which is what the deed itself records. Grover Tully completed the 1880 census for the upper Gauley drainage. He completed the household record at Sorrow Fork. He filed his enumeration. He wrote one additional note in the separate memoranda section of his census packet, which was not part of the official submission, but which survives because the census district supervisor kept personal copies of unusual notations. The note reads, "Sorrow Fork household, ages not verified, would not go in a second time." The notation is dated July 14, 1880. There is no record of Grover Tully conducting any census work after that summer. He does not appear in the 1890 enumeration rolls. He does not appear in any Nicholas County directory after 1881. He appears to have simply stopped. The rational explanation for the deed clause is interpolation. That a single person, at some later date, added the 7 words to all 17 documents, perhaps as a joke or a provocation, or an act of deliberate historical mischief. County clerks have noted this possibility. The forensic examiner noted it. It is the explanation that requires the least extraordinary mechanism. It does not explain the ink aging. It does not explain why, of the 3 deeds examined, each was accessed from a different archive. One at the county clerk's office in Somersville, one at the state archives in Charleston, one in a private collection. The 7 words appear on all 3, in the same hand, in ink aged consistently with the surrounding text, in documents that have been stored in different conditions, handled by different people, for between 80 and 170 years. It does not explain why every attempt to photograph the clause, across 4 documented attempts spanning from 1978 to 2019, has produced an image of a blank margin. The surrounding text photographs normally. The margin where the 7 words appear photographs as empty white space. 2 of the 4 attempts used film cameras. 2 used digital. The result was the same. A photographer who made one of the digital attempts in 2019 has discussed the experience in general terms. She said she could see the words through her viewfinder, and that they were visible to the naked eye when she was in the room with the document. When she reviewed the image on her camera screen immediately after taking it, the margin was blank. Their names. All 6 of the original deed witnesses, plus Aldous himself, appear on the membership roll. The following autumn, a line was drawn through all 7 names simultaneously. The church records do not give a reason. The pastor at the time was a man named Elbert Fry, whose correspondence survives in a private collection. In a letter to his bishop written in November 1849, Fry mentions the Gratchett family once, in a single sentence, at the end of a paragraph about other matters. The sentence reads, "I have removed the Gratchetts from our roll, as I believe it is better for the congregation that they worship in their own manner." The letter does not explain what he meant by their own manner. The bishop did not ask. Reverend Josias Pell rode the Methodist circuit through Nicholas County twice a year from 1851 to 1871. He kept a travel log, entering brief notes about the communities he visited, the names of families, the state of their faith, the condition of roads and weather, small observations about the country he moved through. The log is a document of ordinary pastoral life, methodical and plain, covering 20 years and hundreds of visits, and it is available for review at a small church-affiliated college archive in Buchanan. The entry for Sorrow Fork, made in the autumn of 1863, occupies one line. The line reads, "Did not go in a second time." No entry precedes it explaining the first time. There is no entry for a first visit to Sorrow Fork. The 1863 entry appears to be his only notation about the hollow, and it is a reference to a prior experience that he did not write down. The entry for the following day records a visit to a settlement 12 miles away. The entry before the Sorrow Fork line records a visit to a community 14 miles in the other direction. There is no record of him traveling to Sorrow Fork on those days, or on any day before 1863. He rode the circuit for 8 more years after that entry. He never logged Sorrow Fork again. His route, reconstructed from the log, moved through the upper Gauley drainage every spring and autumn. It would have passed within 2 miles of the Sorrow Fork turnoff 16 times after 1863. He does not mention the turnoff. He does not mention the fork. He does not mention the Gratchett family. The log ends in 1871 when Pell retired from the circuit. A note in the archive's finding aid says he spent his final years in Buchanan, where he died in 1879. The note says he was remembered by his congregation as a gentle and faithful man. It does not say what he was afraid of. It does not record whether anyone asked. In the winter of 1891, a deputy named Ira Vance was sent up Sorrow Fork to investigate a complaint filed by a man named Absalom Tanner, who owned land adjacent to the Gratchett property. The nature of the complaint is not fully preserved. The filing has water damage that obscures the central text, but the legible portions reference a boundary dispute and something described only as the conduct of the family at the upper fork. Deputy Vance rode to Sorrow Fork on a Thursday in February. He returned the same afternoon. His report, filed the following Monday, is 4 sentences long. The first 3 sentences describe road conditions and weather. The 4th sentence says, "I find no cause for official action and recommend the matter be considered closed." The matter was closed that week. Ira Vance served as deputy for Nicholas County for 19 more years. He was known, by colleagues who were interviewed decades later by a local historian, as a thorough and methodical man. Someone who wrote long reports, who followed up, who did not close cases quickly. The 4-sentence report on the Sorrow Fork complaint was the shortest report of his career by a significant margin. When the local historian found it and asked Vance's son about it in 1948, the son said his father had never discussed that particular call, though he had discussed nearly everything else from his years as a deputy. The cases had been his favorite subject in retirement. "Not that one," the son said. That one his father had kept. He paused before he finished the thought. He said, "He kept it so hard it was like it took up space." A 1978 graduate dissertation on land transfer irregularities in West Virginia's coal counties, largely unread and cited only twice since, mentions the Sorrow Fork clause once, in a footnote unrelated to its main argument. The footnote is 4 sentences long. It notes that a nearly identical 7-word margin notation, same length, same placement, same unreadability under camera, had turned up independently in a set of deeds from a county roughly 100 miles south. It does not name the family. It does not name the county. The dissertation's author moved into unrelated work after graduating and has not published on land records since. The Gratchett name disappears from Nicholas County records in stages, the way a fire goes out, not all at once, but in a series of diminishments. The 1890 census, for reasons that parallel the Knott County situation with no apparent connection, records no household at Sorrow Fork. The 1900 census records 4 Gratchetts. The 1910 census records 2. After 1910, the name does not appear in any county record. The photograph of Oma Gratchett, the elderly woman in the cane chair, the unreadable expression, was taken by an itinerant photographer named C.W. Baird, who traveled the Gauley River country in approximately 1910, selling portrait services to rural families. His glass plate negatives were donated to the State History Museum in 1967. The Gratchett photograph is labeled in his ledger only as Sorrow Fork Woman, declined payment. He notes, in the same ledger entry, that she had come to the road to find him, rather than him going up to the property. He notes that she had asked to be photographed. He notes that she had looked at the developed image when he showed it to her. He used a portable darkroom. And that she had nodded once, said something he describes as a few words I didn't catch, and then had walked back up toward the hollow. He notes that he had watched her go, and that the distance was considerable, and that she had not looked back. He notes one other thing, at the very end of the ledger entry, in writing that is slightly smaller than the rest, as though added in reflection rather than in the moment. That her hands, when he had seen them in the developed image, had looked wrong. He does not specify in what way. He writes, "Wrong in a way the photograph makes plain, but the eye does not catch." C.W. Baird continued his circuit through the Gauley River country for another 3 years. He did not return to Sorrow Fork. The photograph is in the museum's collection. It is not on display. It is available for study upon request. The 2 archivists who have handled it in the past 15 years have each, independently and without prompting, said that they did not like looking at it for long. Neither could explain why. One of them said she thought it was the expression. The other said he didn't think it was the expression at all. He said he thought it was the hands. In 1938, a soil conservation survey team mapped the Gauley River drainage for erosion and flood management purposes. Their survey notes, held at the Nicholas County Extension Office, include a section on Sorrow Fork. The notes describe the hollow's topography, soil composition, and timber cover in standard technical language. At the end of the Sorrow Fork section, a surveyor named D.L. Harmon added a personal notation that is not in technical language. It reads, "Structure at upper end of hollow, stone construction, very old, purpose unclear, not mapped. Recommend no further survey of this area." The recommendation was followed. The structure is not on any subsequent survey map of the Gauley drainage. The stone structure Harmon saw in 1938 was not the Gratchett house. The Gratchett house was a frame structure built in the 1850s, documented in 2 early descriptions as a typical 2-room log and plank dwelling. The structure Harmon observed was, by his account, older than anything the Gratchett family could have built. Older, by his estimation, which he did not quantify, than the Gratchetts themselves. He recommended the area be left unsurveyed. None has been conducted there since. The 7 words in the deed margins have been carried by the people who have read them for years now, in some cases for decades. The archivists and researchers and clerks who happened to be in the right room at the right moment and looked at a margin that was not supposed to contain anything and found that it did. They carry the words the way people carry things they cannot set down, not as a burden exactly, but as a presence, something that takes up space. The Nicholas County deed records are open to the public. The Gratchett deeds are filed in the correct order, correctly indexed, correctly labeled. Anyone can request them. Anyone can read them. The margins are visible to the naked eye. The margin in the 3rd deed from 1871, the deed in which Aldous Gratchett the elder, who should have been 88 years old by that point, is listed as a witness in a hand indistinguishable from the hand that signed the 1848 deed. That margin has 7 words in it, the same 7 words as the others, in the same script, in ink that has aged exactly as it should. A researcher who examined that deed in 2011 has said, in a recorded conversation made available with her consent, that she read the 7 words, understood them, and would not repeat them, and that she had made her peace with carrying them. She was asked if the words were a threat. She thought about it for a long time. She said, "No, that was the wrong frame. The words were not a threat. They were a description. They described something that was the case, in plain English, simply and accurately. And the reason she would not repeat them was not that they were frightening. It was that she was not sure they were wrong." There is a name in the Gauley River Drainage Survey records from 1961, a routine water quality assessment, unrelated to the Gratchett property, that appears in a footnote without explanation. The footnote references a parcel of land at the head of Sorrow Fork, above the documented Gratchett acreage, described as privately held, owner of record, Gratchett estate, date of conveyance unclear. The footnote notes that the survey team did not access this parcel. It notes that access was not attempted. It does not note why. The Gratchett estate, as a legal entity, was never formally dissolved. There was no probate. There was no partition. The land at the upper end of Sorrow Fork sits in the county records under a name that has not filed a document, paid a tax, or appeared in any form in Nicholas County since 1910. The land is still there. The deed is still filed. The margins are still legible. And in the room where the deed records are kept, in the clerk's office in Summersville, there is a shelf where the Gratchett files sit between 2 other files in the usual way. And on that shelf there is sometimes, in the early morning before the office opens, a smell that the clerk who arrives first has described as old paper and something else she cannot name. Something underneath the paper smell, something that was there before the paper. And she has worked in that office for 16 years, and she has learned not to look at the Gratchett section of the shelf first thing in the morning. She looks at it later in the day, when there are other people in the building. She has not looked at the deed itself in 4 years. She said, when asked, that she did not intend to look at it again, and said it without drama, the way a person states a preference about food or weather, that some things, once read, have been read enough, and don't need reading a second time. The question of when the Gratchett family arrived, truly arrived, before the deed, before the county record, before Holt Sisler sold them land he described himself as glad to leave, has no clean answer. The 1848 deed is the first document. But the first document is not always the first fact. A militia muster roll from Nicholas County, dated 1831, lists men available for service in the county's defense. The list is alphabetical by surname. There is no Gratchett on it. But in the margin of the muster roll, in a hand different from the recording officer's, someone has written a single word next to a blank line in the G section. The word is exempted. No name is given for the exemption. No reason is given. Exemptions were typically noted with both a name and a cause: infirmity, essential occupation, age. This one has neither. The muster roll is held at the Nicholas County Courthouse in a bound volume of militia records. The blank line and the word exempted have been there as long as anyone can document. They were noted in a county history written in 1892, which described them as a minor clerical irregularity. The 1892 county history was written by a man named Herschel Burdett, who spent 14 years compiling it, and who, in the acknowledgments, thanks by name every family and individual who assisted his research. He thanks the Sisler family descendants. He thanks the Tully family, the Vance family, the Fry family. He does not thank any Gratchett. He does not mention the Gratchett family anywhere in 847 pages of county history. This is not an oversight. 14 years of research and a family that held deeded land in Nicholas County for over 60 years appears nowhere. Burdett was thorough. His work is still used as a primary reference. He knew the county's records with exceptional intimacy. He simply did not include them. His personal papers, held in the state archives in Charleston, contain research notes for every chapter of his history. There is a folder labeled G, surnames beginning with G, that contains notes on the Gallagher family, the Groves family, the Gross family. The folder contains no notes on Gratchett. There is instead a single index card filed at the back of the folder behind the other notes that reads, Gratchett, Sorrow Fork, not for inclusion. See Personal Journal, Volume 4. Volume 4 of Herschel Burdett's Personal Journal is missing from his papers. Volumes 1, 2, 3, and 5 are present. Volume 4, which would cover the years 1886 to 1889, the heart of his research period, is not there. The archive's finding aid lists it as not received with collection. His widow donated the papers in 1921. Whether Volume 4 was in the collection at that time is not documented. No inventory was made at the time of donation. The index card is still in the G folder. It is available to view. Researchers who have found it have generally followed the same path. They read the card, note the missing volume, and then request the Gratchett deed records, and then reach the point in their research that most researchers reach, which is a particular wall. Not a dead end exactly, but a place where the available evidence stops yielding and starts doing something else. Something harder to name. Something that requires a decision about how much more ground is worth covering. Most researchers stop at the wall. A few have kept going anyway. None of the ones who kept going have published what they found. One of them, a man named Gerald Archer, who spent 3 months in 2006 conducting what he described as a comprehensive survey of primary sources related to the Gratchett family, posted a brief note on a West Virginia history forum in 2007 saying that he had discontinued his research and would not be resuming it. He offered no explanation. He was asked, in a reply, whether he had found what he was looking for. He replied once, "I found something. I don't think it was what I was looking for." He has not posted on that forum since. He has not, as far as anyone has been able to determine, published anything related to Appalachian history since 2007. He appears, from public records, to still be living in Morgantown, where he was a graduate student in 2006. He has not responded to requests for comment. The forum thread is still accessible. His final reply is still there. The thread has had no new posts in 11 years. The last documented physical observation of a Gratchett at Sorrow Fork was made in 1914 by a mail carrier named Everett Schock, who served the rural routes in the Upper Gauley drainage. Schock kept a personal log of his routes, distances, road conditions, notable observations, in a series of pocket notebooks that his family preserved and eventually donated to the County Historical Society. The entry for Sorrow Fork, dated April 7, 1914, reads, "Left package at the Sorrow Fork turnoff per arrangement. No approach to the property. Saw a figure at the tree line upper end. Same as before. Did not wave." The arrangement referenced is not explained in any other entry. The notation, same as before, implies previous observations of the figure. No earlier entry in the surviving notebooks mentions the figure or describes the arrangement. Either the earlier notebooks are lost or the arrangement predated them. Did not wave is the last clause. It is ambiguous in a way that Schock probably did not intend. He did not wave. Or the figure did not wave. Or neither of them waved, for reasons that made the absence of a wave between two people visible from a distance feel, to a man who spent his days traveling through that country and who wrote plain factual notes in a pocket ledger, worth writing down. After April 7, 1914, Sorrow Fork does not appear again in Shock's notebooks. His route log shows him covering the same area through 1919 when he retired. He simply stops noting the fork. He does not note that he stopped delivering there. He does not note a change in the arrangement. He stops mentioning it the way a person stops mentioning a thing they have decided, quietly and without announcement, to leave alone. The package he delivered on April 7, 1914 is not described. Its origin is not recorded. It was left at the turnoff, not at the house. No one came to collect it while he was there. Whether anyone came later is not documented. Sorrow Fork still runs into the Gauley River. The water is clear in the lower reach and becomes something else in the upper hollow. Not dramatically, not in a way a photograph would capture, but in a way that people who have been in that country describe consistently, using different words that amount to the same observation. The light sits differently on it. The sound of it is wrong in a way that is hard to specify. A fisherman who has worked the Gauley River for 30 years, asked about the Sorrow Fork confluence in a recorded conversation, said he had fished every tributary in that drainage over 3 decades, had been to the mouth of Sorrow Fork many times, and had never once gone up it. Asked why, he thought about it. It wasn't a place you went, he said. Not really. He paused before he added the rest of it. He said, "It feels like somewhere things come from." He went back to his truck. The 7 words in the deed margins have not been translated, not publicly, not in any document that survives. They have been read. They have been understood, or understood enough. They sit in 17 margins in 3 different archives, in ink that ages correctly, in a hand that should not be consistent across 71 years, on documents that photograph as clean white space where the words are. They describe something. The clerk in Somersville does not look at the deed anymore. The photographer does not go back. Gerald Archer does not publish. The fisherman does not go up the fork. And in the upper end of Sorrow Fork, above the documented Gratchett acreage, above the stone structure that D.L. Harmon saw in 1938, and recommended no one map, there is land held in the county record under a name that has not spoken to the county in over 100 years. The land is still privately held. The deed is still valid. The margins still say what they say. She is not afraid of the words. She is more careful than that. She knows what the words say. She read them once, years ago, when she first started working there, and didn't know yet that there were things in that building you read once and then decided about. She decided. She comes in every morning. She does her work. She does not look at that deed. The Oma Gratchett photograph, meanwhile, sits 2 buildings over, in a climate-controlled storage room at the State Museum, in an acid-free sleeve, catalogued correctly under its accession number. The collection is inventoried twice a year, in spring and in autumn, on a Tuesday, the same as every other collection in the building. Whoever draws the Gratchett box that day confirms the item is present, checks it against the log, and moves on